Hello everyone, my name is Gus.
Hi, I'm Woody.
We have received dozens of requests for us to review this video. I haven't watched it yet, you haven't watched it yet, but I saw the title. It's called Cave Diving is Insane. So I'm like, okay, well, I wonder what this guy's going to talk about. I have no idea, but anyway, they want our response.
A lot of people think that,
And
by
we're
the
gonna
way. Just
give
so
it a
you know,
shot.
he's
Yeah.
in the majority, to be honest with you.
True.
Most people think that, and
But at the same time, most people don't know anything about cave diving, right? That's why people who are not even divers watch Dive Talk, because they want to learn. They're interested on, well, what is this about? And they watch our channel.
yeah.
But most people are thinking cave diving is insane because they don't know anything about it.
Which I was one of those people.
Yeah.
I used to think it was
Me too.
insane, and then I learned more and more and more about it, and I think it's insane to cave dive if you are not really seriously properly trained to cave dive.
And have the right equipment.
Definitely. So
Correct.
let's go.
Let's give it a shot.
A crowd of people gathered at the edge of the Zacaton sinkhole in northern Mexico. It was 1994, and the world-famous cave diver, Sheck Exley, badass name, was attempting a world record for the deepest successful cave dive. Though he spent most of his time as a maths teacher in Florida, Exley was a legend in the cave diving community. He'd literally written the book on necessary safety measures. And at only 45 years
That's
old,
true.
he'd completed over 4,000 cave dives. But age was starting to get the better of him, and he was beginning to reconsider his dangerous hobby.
I will say, if you notice, the video is sped up a little bit. It's because it's a super long video, so I'm trying to go fast on it. But it is true. Sheck Exley is a legend. He wrote the rules of cave diving, which we follow. So we consider him kind of like the father of cave diving, even though he wasn't the first cave diver. The first cave dive happened in England. It didn't happen in the U.S. But the fun fact about it is they're saying Sheck Exley had over 4,000 cave dives, which makes you appreciate a couple things. Number one, the fact that Ed has 12,000 cave dives.
Yeah.
It's insane. And a lot of, elite cave divers out there have thousands and thousands of it. The coolest thing about it is there is an association or an organization, I would say, called the NSSCDS, which stands for National Speleological Society Cave Diving Chapter. NSSCDS, I think. I don't remember what the last S is. Cave diving.
I can't remember.
Hold on.
Chat. GBT.
I'm-
GBT.
I'm looking section, cave diving section. I believe that's what the last S is for. I don't remember, but they give out awards for milestone cave dives. The first one is 100. So once you do 100 cave dives, you received the Abe Davis Award, which is named, I believe, after the first known American cave diver. I think his name is Abe Davis. And you receive that award when you complete 100 successful safe cave dives, which you and I have. We both have the Abe Davis Award. Then the next one is the Henry Nicholson Award, which I think Henry Nicholson is like a famous doctor who is also a cave diver. I don't remember the whole history about it. But the Nicholson Award is at 500. And then the highest one is the Sheck Exley Award, which is at 1,000. So you do 1,000 safe cave dives, and you can apply to receive the Sheck Exley Award. I also think there's another award that is not very well known. It's not named after anybody, but I think it's if you do cave dives in 5 different countries, you can get an award as well. So it's like I don't know, like a nomad cave diver award of some kind. I don't even know if that's still a thing, but I believe I've read about this. But anyway, Sheck Exley, as the father of cave diving, or safe cave diving as well, because he wrote the rules. If you get 1,000, which I hope someday we reach that, you get the award, but not at our rate, since we dive like every year, once a decade.
Terrible, I know.
So, anyway, let's go. So if you see the video is going too fast, it's because of that. It's just way too long. It's 30 minutes long, so we're trying to speed
And
it
you
up
just
a little
talked for 30 minutes.
Correct.
So now it's an hour.
After he completed the world record, he planned to retire. The crowd at the edge of the sinkhole began to grow restless as the cameras collected more and more footage of undisrupted water. Little did they know, Sheck Exley wasn't going to resurface. A man known for his cautiousness in a famously dangerous sport had finally found his limit. But how could such an experienced diver fail to resurface? And why is cave diving such an intrinsically dangerous activity? And
That's
perhaps
good.
most mysteriously,
No, good
what
question.
drives people to do it anyway? The answer partly lies in the caves themselves. These hollow bits of rock have been an important part of the human story ever since Homo sapiens first started existing, and something about them draws us back again and again. All caves start out as rock that's a little bit softer than the rock surrounding it. It's usually limestone, but not exclusively. Over time, water dissolves out the soft rock and a passage is left behind. Sometimes the water table drops and the passages are exposed to air. Sometimes it doesn't. Caves are often depicted in the media as horizontal, but in reality, they can travel in every direction imaginable. Some are mostly up and down, which are often called vertical caves. Some start horizontal and then change direction.
By the way, just a quick fact about caves. I know people think I have a PhD in caves. I don't, but I know this fact. Is he says sometimes the caves get flooded, sometimes they're not. And most of the time, actually, the caves go through periods. They go dry and wet, dry and wet, dry and wet. And the way you know that is because there's formations. There's stalactites and stalagmites. Stalactites are formed by water dripping and leaving minerals with every drop of water. And over years and centuries and thousands of years, these formations grow from, again, water that is dripping over a long period of time. So when you go in a flooded cave and you see stalactites, you know that cave was dry. And in some caves, like in the Bahamas, for example, even super deep, you see like dried up mud. Remember the mud that you see on the way to Fangorn Forest?
Cracked.
Yeah, like cracked mud.
It froze like that in time.
Deep underwater. So you know that mud was wet at some point. It dried up and then it got flooded again, which is super cool.
This 360-degree exploration is what makes caving such an exciting hobby. It's like hiking, it's just harder. And the fact that it's in the dark makes it even more enticing. Space Mountain might not be Disney's most elaborate roller coaster, but turn off the lights and suddenly everyone wants to ride it. Since caves are formed by water, the vast majority are incredibly wet. It's this moisture that is responsible for beautiful cave formations
Stalactites.
like stalactites and stalagmites.
There you go.
It also means that exploring a cave can require anything from a pair of waterproof shoes to scuba gear. For caves below the water table, there may be no access to air at all once you go inside. And this is where cave diving comes into play. This
wish
is
I could swim that
truly a sport
fast.
all on its own, distinct from both caving and diving. Now, most cavers stick to above water sections of caves, only putting on an air tank to get around sections that happen to be flooded. Most divers stick to the open water, where there are beautiful coral reefs and exotic fish to admire. Cave diving combines the most extreme ends of both sports, and one wrong move can mean death. As a result, cave diving is not a sport for the weak-willed. It appeals to extreme divers who are not afraid to flirt with death. Often, they are rewarded with some of the remote and most beautiful places on planet Earth, so stark and alien that it feels like they're on another planet.
Yeah.
For many cave divers,
True.
it's that beauty that keeps them coming back. For others, it's the desire to keep pushing their body further and further into the unknown. But there is more in those watery caves than simply challenge.
But I want to make one comment here because I understand what he just said about the desire.
Yeah.
It is a really, I've only done it a couple of times. It's a really big high to push yourself into the absolute unknown. I know why they get so addicted, and I know you know the feeling as well. You literally get to explore something that no one's ever seen.
Yeah.
You have no idea where to go. It's not like when you go cave diving and the line is already there.
Yeah.
It looks just as good left and right and straight. It all looks good, and you have to find it. You could go left, it dead ends. If you just would have dropped a little, they go back to the same place, and then it goes on for miles. You get to be an explorer.
Yeah.
In planet Earth of places that have never been seen, not even light has penetrated, and it is an amazing feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are you really going to find? Nothing much.
Yeah.
Maybe where the water flows, maybe new formations, but it's the feeling that you were the first. And
Yeah,
that's the addiction.
I agree with that. I think the only thing I disagree with is this whole notion that I've discussed in the past in this show that if you make one mistake, you die. Like, no, we make mistakes cave diving all the time. Like, all the time
Good point.
Like, how many times have we gone in with a plan and being like, we're going to go to this section of the cave, and then we go in and we're like, I missed.
Most of the time.
I missed the turn somewhere.
Usually.
Let's do this dive instead.
Yeah.
Like, just on the fly, you're like, okay, we didn't get to this place, so let's just go to
But we
that
may get
place.
criticized for that because some cave divers would say you shouldn't be missing those things.
No, but think of the most egregious errors. The most egregious errors. Like, your rebreather completely stops working. You run out of air because you had a leak and you missed it or whatever, assuming you're with a buddy, okay? You run completely out of air. You get lost. You lose the line. We train for all those things. We train line, finding the line, incomplete zero visibility. You train finding your buddy. You train exiting the cave with zero visibility, just an okay on the line while sharing air with your body. Like, we train for everything. So this notion that one little mistake and you're dead is dumb. It's not reality. There's got to be a comedy of errors for you to actually die cave diving. Like, or unless you consider like breathing the wrong gas a little mistake. I think that's a huge mistake, right? Which people have died doing that. But that is not because of cave diving. That is just physiology. You start breathing 100% oxygen at 100 feet, 30 meters deep, you're going to die. Like, that is just, you made a mistake, has nothing to do with cave diving. You're just breathing the wrong gas at the wrong depth. That can happen. But this notion that you move a finger wrong and you're dead, that's not cave diving. That's just not a thing.
The human body wasn't meant to explore such extreme conditions, and divers have to be careful not to push themselves too far. One wrong miscalculation, and they could become another tragedy.
Well, that's what you were just saying. Bro, I don't agree with that.
Famous Sheck Exley. However, Exley was not always a legend, but his path to greatness started when he was 19 years old, visiting a local swimming hole with his younger brother Edward. He'd already gained a reputation as a talented young diver, and while attending the University of Georgia, he regularly came home to Jacksonville to test out new dive equipment. That day, he had a new depth meter that could be worn on the wrist and capture data on how far below the surface a diver had gone.
Back in the day.
He and his brother were eager to try it out. There was no scuba diving allowed at this particular swimming hole, so the brothers left their scuba equipment in the car. They planned to practice their free diving, which foregoes air tanks in favor of holding one's breath underwater. This means the diver isn't weighted down by bulky equipment and can maneuver much more freely through the environment, kind of like a fish. Like most siblings, the Exley brothers could get pretty competitive. They took turns challenging each other to hold their breath longer, cover more distance, and dive the deepest. This was why Sheck had brought the depth meter that day. Their brotherly competition would finally have an indisputable number. The brothers took turns strapping the depth meter to their wrist, inhaling deeply and plunging into the warm Florida water. Edward went first, traveling 30 feet below the surface. Sheck went a little further. Edward took a deeper breath and beat his brother's record. Sheck once again went just a little bit further. Edward was determined to beat his older brother, so he took several hard, fast breaths to fill his lungs to capacity. Sheck watched from the surface as his brother plunged into the depths, the furthest either of them had gone without scuba gear. It was a wonderfully impressive dive and a clear victory in the contest. But as Sheck watched, his brother, now returning to the surface, suddenly went limp. His body began to sink downward. Sheck immediately filled his lungs with air and dove down to reach his brother, but he was already beyond the limits of a free diver. Nevertheless, he tried again and again, but Edward remained out of reach.
I didn't know this. Did you?
Shore and ran to the parking lot, pulling his air tank and scuba gear from the car. However, the constant free diving had caught up with him. As he attempted to put on the gear, his body collapsed from exhaustion. Another swimmer noticed the commotion and asked what was going on.
No idea.
When Sheck explained that his brother was at the bottom of the swimming hole, the other man quickly grabbed the equipment and dove down to retrieve him. Edward wasn't breathing, and an exhausted Sheck began CPR. Miraculously, Edward revived long enough to be taken to the hospital, but he died later that night. The experience of losing his brother stayed with Sheck for the rest of his life. He still loved diving, but he was now acutely aware of just how dangerous it could be. He knew the grief of losing someone he loved to the watery depths, and he wanted to prevent anyone from ever feeling that again. As a result, Sheck Exley not only pioneered the sport of cave diving, but became its biggest advocate for diving safely. His methods included double checks, triple checks, and equipment redundancies to make sure that any situation could be dealt with without a loss of life. He was a fanatic that gained the respect of an entire generation. However, Edward Exley was far from the last person to die in a diving accident. Even his brother's influence wasn't enough to keep people safe. Caves are just intrinsically dangerous places, and even the most cautious diver can find themselves in a bad situation. In fact, there are several different types of cave diving, each with their own appeal and challenges. Divers will often circulate between the different types, driven by a desire to explore these unique underwater worlds. The first is a cenote. As many people know, it's not uncommon for the roof of an underground cave to suddenly collapse, causing a sinkhole. A sinkhole can then fill with rainwater or groundwater,
This
creating
looks
a circular
awesome.
pool. They can
Look
range
at
in
that.
size from less than a meter to hundreds of meters deep. Cenotes are especially common in the Yucatan region of Mexico, and the formations were of special importance to the ancient Maya. Cenotes are considered to be cavern diving. On land, a cave and a cavern, they're essentially the same thing. But in cave diving, they have specific definitions. A cavern is an area where the sunlight can still reach.
Yep.
A cave is defined by its complete enclosure and the darkness that results from it. Since cenotes are water-filled sinkholes, sunlight is usually available all the way down. This means the diver is always aware of which way is up and does not need to carry a flashlight. Cavern diving is considerably safer and much more beginner-friendly, making cenotes popular travel destinations. A similar type of cave diving are blue holes. These are sinkholes that happen to occur in the ocean, usually in shallow coastal areas.
We're
with
going.
limestone.
We're going
They
there.
contrast sharply with the light blue water around them, and their sudden depths create a dark indigo color that gives them their name. Because there is very little water circulation within the hole, there's not a lot of plant or animal life, and sunlight can penetrate surprisingly deeply. However, at some point, even the brightest sun will vanish. Although, similar to cenotes, blue holes can be far more dangerous because of their extreme depths. The world's deepest blue hole, which also happens to be in Mexico, is over 420 meters below sea level. That's 1,280
Very
feet.
deep.
For context, the current world record for the deepest dive using scuba equipment is 1,090 feet. A blue hole might be a cabin dive, but their extreme depths should not be trifled with. The blue hole of Denab off the coast of Egypt is considered to hold the record for the most diver fatalities. This is mostly due to its popularity and a lack of understanding of how dangerous it can be to go deep. Going down is easy, coming back up can be really difficult. And finally, there is the most technically challenging of them all, cave diving. This involves moving through pitch-black, fully enclosed passageways where the sun doesn't shine. Some passages are spacious and easy to move through, while others are barely wide enough for a human body with an air tank. Only the most extreme and devoted divers are willing to try it, and some fail to come back. But thanks to the work of Sheck Exley, cave divers know what steps they must take to stay safe in these
I disagree with that statement.
But it may be true.
Let me explain.
Go ahead, and then I want to say something that may not agree with you. Go ahead.
Let me explain. The statement that he said that only the most dedicated divers or most passionate divers become cave divers, I don't agree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with not being a cave diver. Like, you can be the most passionate diver in the world, and caves are not for you. Like, you just don't want to go in an overhead environment because you don't like it, because you have a phobia, because you're not interested. Like, I'm not interested in skydiving. Not that I'm afraid of heights. I learned how to fly planes. Like, I have no problems getting on planes. I'm just not interested in it. You could be super passionate as a diver and stay out of caves. And I have no problem with that. And I don't think any cave diver has a problem with that. I don't think any cave diver will look down at a non-cave diver and be like, you're an idiot, or you're whatever. You're a wuss. You're not brave. Like, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's another skill, like learning how to dive at night, learning other skills that you learn diving, more dangerous, of course, than other skills like navigation, but it doesn't make you a less of a diver, a less passionate diver, unless you're a cave diver. I don't agree with that at all.
I agree.
Yeah.
No, I agree. That's kind of where I was headed. Absolutely. I mean, if you want to pursue cave diving, the only thing I was going to add to what he said is very few do as a percentage of all divers.
True.
Because caves are inherently dangerous.
Of course.
In my opinion, they are. It takes, for all the training I've ever done, the most rigorous, if you want to call it the most challenging, has the most skills that I needed to master, the most level of mastering certain proficiency in any of the scuba courses I've ever taken was through cave diving. And it made me, whatever the definition of a better diver is overall,
It makes you a more capable diver, for
more
sure.
neutral, more better in trim,
For sure.
better. I was better after learning to cave dive, in my opinion.
For sure. And I think that's why a lot of people consider cave diving kind of the black belt of diving, is because of those skills that you have to gain in order to do it safely. But again, you can have those skills as a non-cave diver as well.
Oh, yeah.
This is not specific just to cave diving. There are certain skills that we have cave diving that wouldn't be super applicable in open water diving, but the whole trim and buoyancy and kicking and helicopter kicks, back kicks, like all of those things are super useful in open water diving. So if you gain those skills and you don't want to be a cave diver, nothing but respect from me. Like, I don't see non-cave divers as inferior at all.
Agree.
Personally, I don't.
Underwater mazes. As mentioned before, cave diving is unlike any other kind of scuba diving. Inside an underwater cave, the stone roof prevents the diver from surfacing, meaning there is only one way out, the way you came in. To prevent cave divers from
looks so
getting
nice.
lost, a
Oh,
road is
look.
used to mark the exit
Oh,
path.
that's a free diver.
Popular cave diving spots, these are installed and regularly maintained by diving professionals. The rope, called a main line or a permanent line, starts just beyond the cabin section and continues into the cave, often terminating at a dead-end passageway. If there are other passages that the cave diver might want to explore, the rope will fork and arrows will be attached to show the way to the exit. Ideally, the line is placed near the cave floor so that divers can swim over it to avoid wear and tear. Divers make an OK gesture
And
by connecting
entanglement.
their thumb and index finger and letting the rope run through the O. This lack of constant contact keeps ropes in good condition for as long as possible. For more advanced divers, a cave
He's
might not have
nailing
a
it.
line already installed.
He's doing a good
or
job.
They might wish to explore an unmarked section of the cave. In these circumstances, the divers themselves have to create a line. In this situation, the diver secures the line outside the cave and then slowly unspools the rope, making sure to keep tension and avoid tangles. When the diver changes direction,
Yes.
they secure the rope again, mindful that every contact point has the potential to fray. After their exploring is over, they simply wrap the rope back up on their way out of the cave. If there are multiple groups exploring a cave at the same time, those exiting have the right of way. It's recommended that all cave divers carry at least 2 extra reels of rope that are
Not
at
that
least
big.
45
Well,
meters or 150 feet
that's
long.
a
These
error
sections
in
can
the
be
video.
used to bridge gaps in permanent lines or be used to mark a path if someone needs to move away from the permanent line. All divers must be aware of the line at all times. Getting equipment tangled in the rope can mean certain death for everyone. Letting go of the
Okay,
rope can
bro.
be pretty dangerous. Likewise,
We've
ropes
already
can
covered
fragment,
that.
snap free, leaving divers with no clear path to the exit. If conditions change in any way on their way back to the surface, the diver must either find a way to cope or face the fact that they will run out of air and die. There's also the additional challenge of total darkness. Caves are some of the darkest places on planet Earth, and underwater caves definitely no exception. With no sunlight, the only light comes from a diver's flashlight. If anything happens to that light, the diver is plunged into total and complete darkness.
You know what the main thing I'm thinking? I'm craving cave diving now. I haven't cave dived in a while, and I'm looking at those
Yeah.
videos. I know exactly
We
what
gotta
it
go.
feels like. I can picture the sand down there and the line and the
Everything.
formations, and I got to just the fact that I have to navigate. Don't touch this. Be perfect.
Yeah.
You know how you're
If you
thinking
thought-
that? I'm getting that. It's like when you smell an old scent, it brings back a memory, and I'm.
If you
feeling it.
thought you're gonna make us reconsider, this is the complete opposite. We
I
wanna
want to go.
But it's funny that he said the caves are one of the darkest places on the world. Is there a darker place? Like deep inside a cave, there's nothing. You cannot see anything. And we've done videos before where we turn the lights off and we just record, and it's just black. Like might as well use the video effect of go to black. I mean, it's 0. There's nothing.
It
It's
doesn't matter if
completely
your eyes are open or
Can't
closed
imagine
at that
blacker
point.
than that.
Open your eyes, close your eyes. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. It has to
It's
be.
a wild feeling.
It's hard to think that there's a darker place than inside an underwater cave. It's completely pitch black.
Now, Sheck Exley was aware of these dangers and had ideas on how to mitigate them. In 1979, he published the book Basic Cave Diving, a blueprint for survival. At the time, it was a niche but growing sport. For some cave divers, reading the book was the first time that actually considered that something could go wrong during a dive. Sheck Exley stressed the importance of always using a line, and all divers should make sure that those lines are in good condition before entering a cave. If any damage is found, you need to stop and repair it immediately before moving on. He also stated that all cave divers needed to carry at least 3 sources of light, a practice that was quickly becoming standard.
Yep.
above
These
water
are all our
caves.
rules that
Means
came from
main
Sheck.
source of light, then a backup, and then a backup for the backup. This ensures that no one is left in the darkness while exploring an underwater cave. In his book, Exley also standardized the rule of thirds. Logically, most divers would make sure to use less than half their air when exploring a cave so that they would have half a tank to return back to the surface. Exley believed that that wasn't good enough. Smart man. He believed that divers should only use 1/3 of their air. That way, they had 1/3 to return to the surface and 1/3 of a tank in reserve in case something goes wrong. This extra air could also be shared with someone else if their equipment malfunctioned. The Optus device that could serve as either a backup mouthpiece or a second mouthpiece to allow 2 divers to breathe from the same tank was a standard piece of equipment in Exley's book. This rule would end up saving his life. In addition to being a recreational cave diver, Sheck Exley also held the coveted title of professional cave explorer. To this day, hundreds of miles of underground tunnels remain unmapped all around the world. Exley, with his unmatched skills in cave diving, was often called in to demystify these watery depths. Of course, all of this had to be done during the summer or on the weekends because Exley's main job was teaching algebra at a local Florida high school. A fellow cave diver recalled a busy weekend with Exley in September 1973. In 2 days, they explored 800 feet into Blue Springs, found 100 feet of new passage at Williford Springs, went to another place also called Blue Springs for yet more exploration, and ended up finding a beautiful 400 feet of cave at Little Dismal Sink. It's a weird name. All in all, a very successful weekend. In the cave diving community,
That's very
Sheck
common.
Exley was considered a tank. He ate an enormous amount of food, never got tired, and seemed immune to the physical effects of deep diving. However, he wouldn't outrun bad luck forever. In 1983, Sheck Exley was given the task of mapping the Atlantida Tunnel in the Canary Islands, the longest submerged lava tube in the world. At 180 feet below the surface, the air tank of Exley's dive partner malfunctioned. Because of the rule of thirds, the 2 men were able to share the same air tank until they were close enough to the surface to signal for help. Luckily, the support team was able to throw down extra air tanks and everyone returned safely. But it was an alarmingly close call. In addition to confusing passageways and panic-inducing darkness, there is one more factor that makes cave diving such a dangerous experience: silt. Caves are not the cleanest places. When exploring above-ground caves, it's not unusual to emerge covered head to toe in mud, but mud is an advantage. It stays on the cave floor.
Well, just to clarify it, sometimes it does where you're silted out, tight area where there's no flow, right? Caves that don't have water movement, man, I have been in a silt out where I can't even see my dive computer.
Nah,
you better be holding the line. I mean, I'm like, I can't see anything.
Yeah.
With you, I've been there.
Yeah.
I mean, going to Woody's room, there's parts where you're done.
0.
But a lot of caves have flow, strong flow. If you did silt it and you waited, it will clear. It just depends.
Yeah, it depends on the silt, the type of silt as well, because that question comes up. It's like, how long does it stay in the water? It depends on the silt.
Yeah.
Some cases it's like this fine like powder that seems to
Blows
stay
away.
there for like days
Oh, that
if there's
one,
no
yeah.
flow. Like what is that? It's like clay. Like I don't even know, but it's like this super thin like powdered sugar
misty.
level. Stays there forever, and then sometimes it's like beach sand type of thing. It's like heavy silt, and as soon as you kick it up, it just falls down and it's cleared again. It's those. I like that silt. It's pretty good.
Water, the mud can easily get churned up and cause a dangerous situation that divers call a silt out.
Yeah.
During a silt out, the disturbed sediment mixes with the water and becomes a murky, muddy cloud that can reduce visibility to zero. In his book, Sheck
Definitely
Exley
true.
calls a cave diving accident at Royal Springs in Florida. Two young sailors from a local Navy base had planned on a simple open water dive, but couldn't resist going into a cave that, unknown to them, had a dangerously high level of silt. The two entered the cave without laying a line and soon found themselves in a completely impenetrable cloud of muck, able to find their way out, and then ran out of air and died before rescuers arrived. As
Yeah,
with many cave
that's what
diving
happens.
fatalities, the sailors had multiple things go wrong. Not laying a guideline was their first mistake. Their second, kicking up silt. The best way to deal with a silt out is to avoid one in the first place. Cave divers have multiple techniques for this, one of which is the frog kick, the
Yeah.
leg motion associated with the breaststroke. This propels the swimmer mostly through moving the knees and causes less water movement than the flutter kick. Another option is grabbing rocks or the cave wall to propel themselves forward. Finger walking, poking the index fingers into the sand to pull yourself forward, also has gained popularity in recent years. If a diver finds themselves in a silt out, the permanent line can literally save their lives. In less extreme silts, it may be possible to push through into clearer waters. However, if the visibility is so low that a diver can't see or communicate with their companions, Exley stated that it was time to cancel the dive and exit the cave. Exley also stressed
Yes.
the importance of mental preparation as well as physical preparation. An entire chapter of his book was dedicated to avoiding panic. He knew very well that even the most self-disciplined diver could be prone to freaking out when faced with darkness, a broken line, or malfunctioning equipment.
I will say though, that's not always the case. Sometimes I will, because we're not perfect cave divers, so I don't have a problem admitting this. Sometimes something will happen. Like I remember in Mexico, for example, I saw there was like a rock or something, and I went to pull on it, and it moved. It wasn't like a rock that was like affixed to the wall. And as soon as I moved it, it wasn't like a big passage. As soon as I moved it, it fell, and boof, just like all the still came out. And I remember just pushing forward, laughing, being like, that's going to suck on the way out. Like, that's going to be zero miss. So you don't always cancel the dive. Sometimes you just know that on the way out, it's going to be zero miss. I mean, there's nothing you can do. But we train for that. It's not a big deal. You know, when people ask, it's like, how do you handle zero miss? You just okay the line and swim through it.
I mean,
It's
there are some caves that it's 100% you're going to be in zero viz.
Yeah.
Maybe not by accident.
Yeah.
Nobody, not Sheck, nobody. El
Yeah.
Diablo, you 1,000%
The
on the way in,
entrance.
you cannot
Cannot see anything.
see.
Yeah, and you're just like, on the way out, it will be like that.
Horrible. I just get the line at that point, and you just
Right.
and then the line, you just that's why you learn these techniques.
It's a non-issue.
However, in cave diving, panic can be fatal. Hyperventilating uses up precious air supplies, and thrashing around is both exhausting and can damage much-needed equipment. It is absolutely crucial for a cave diver to remain calm during an emergency. In fact, he recommended that dive teams sit down and discuss potential emergency situations so they can be mentally prepared for them when they happen. The safety aspects of basic cave diving quickly made it the sport's Bible. It was published by the American National Speleological Society, an organization dedicated to cave exploration and science. They believe that Exley's book has saved untold numbers of lives. Today, it's considered to be cave diving's
Cave diving
foundational
section.
text. However, there is more to staying safe in an underwater cave than just holding onto a line or avoiding a silt out. The human body is designed for land, and prolonged periods underwater can cause it to malfunction in strange and unnerving ways. The most common condition is decompression sickness, which is most commonly known in the dive community as the bends. This occurs when a diver is returning to the surface after a deep dive. As we all know, water's heavy. That's why swimming is excellent exercise. But there is a big difference between surface water and deep water. Gravity is continuously pulling all of that water downward, and the further you dive, the greater the pressure. This wouldn't be a problem if the
Okay.
human body wasn't completely dependent on breathing oxygen gas. Lots of pressure on gas in a tank or in a human lung can be disastrous. In order to circulate gases throughout the body, they are dissolved into the blood. Oddly enough, these dissolved gases are usually fine with increased pressure that forces them to contract. However, decompression or the diver returning to the surface can be a problem. If the body doesn't have time to adjust, the decreased pressure will cause nitrogen gas that was dissolved in the blood to expand and form bubbles. These bubbles can travel anywhere in the body, but they are especially attracted to joints. This often causes excruciating
He's very
pain.
good, by the
Divers
way.
who have returned to the surface too quickly will sometimes bend over in agony, hence the condition's nickname of the bends. But decompression sickness can take many forms. There is the mild skin bends, which manifests as itchy and tingling skin. There is also the more serious type 2, named the chokes.
Is he a diver? Because he's really very good at explaining these concepts very accurately.
Yeah, but
it
there are
seems
some
like it.
things. There are some things that he wasn't clear enough. So, for example, it's like, well, deep water is heavier because you have gravity pulling you, and that affects your body. It does affect your body, but only gas-filled cavities in your body. It doesn't affect your muscles and your bones or whatever.
But
It's like,
overall,
you don't feel the pressure.
Overall, he's very good.
He's doing a good job.
He's really
Yeah.
technically correct on almost all of this
Yeah,
stuff.
he said, for example, nitrogen is dissolved in your blood. It's not really. You breathe, and we don't use nitrogen at all. Even though most of the air we breathe is nitrogen, is 79% of it. You breathe it in, you breathe it out. Your body doesn't absorb it or use it in any way. It's just there.
Well, under pressure, the nitrogen does absorb into liquid solution blood.
Well,
and
it
then
goes
when
to
you
your
go
blood, but you
out-
breathe it out. You don't use it.
But
That's
the
what
point
I mean.
is, when you're going up, the problem is the nitrogen comes out of solution
Mm-hmm.
and turns into nitrogen air bubbles,
Yeah.
and that your body can only handle so much bubbles. Or
I
could-
will say,
it
this
could
is
stop
important.
you up. It could.
This is important.
Cause you
And
to be-
people are going to think I have a blood and breathing PhD. I don't.
That's obvious.
But I'm adding this because I think it's interesting. He said that in order for us to use the gas that we're breathing, which he called oxygen air, whatever, the gas that we breathe, it goes into our bloodstream. That's also true for smells. So like when you smell something nasty, that's in your blood. It literally went through your lungs and into your blood, and that poop that you're smelling, that's poop in your blood right now.
That's great.
I wanted
Thank
to
you.
add that for everyone.
That was important.
which means that bubbles have entered the spinal cord. This can cause headaches, dizziness, fatigue, confusion, mood swings, and painful breathing. And although it's uncommon, decompression sickness can be deadly. Luckily, if caught quickly, the bends is curable. Treatment involves breathing pure oxygen in a pressurized chamber. This mimics the condition of the dive and encourages the nitrogen bubbles to dissolve as normal. Since dehydration is often making things worse, intravenous fluids are also given. To help with the pain, the diver can take over-the-counter pain medication. Of course, the best way to handle decompression sickness is to avoid getting decompression sickness. Since the condition is caused by returning to the surface too quickly, divers simply take their time. This can mean either slowly and continuously swimming upward or pausing to take a decompression stop. The deeper the dive, the longer the stops. In some of Sheck Exley's deep dives, proper decompression could take hours and extra air tanks had to be stashed for the way back up. As always, Exley was not content with the usual way of doing things. He had a theory that breathing gas with less nitrogen would reduce the risk of bubbles and allow divers to return to the surface more quickly. He began experimenting with Trimix, a combination of oxygen, nitrogen, and helium that would perform better under pressure than regular air. On March 28, 1989, Sheck Exley decided to put Trimix to the test. He descended 881 feet, or 268 meters, into El Nacimiento del Rio Monte, an underwater cave north of Mexico City. His decompression stops took over 14 hours, but he returned to the surface safe and sound. It was a new world record for the deepest cave dive done with scuba equipment, and it would not be the last time that he dove deep to test his limits. Another danger of deep diving is nitrogen narcosis, often called the rapture of the deep, or being narked. No one knows exactly why this happens, but breathing compressed gas has the ability to make a diver feel intoxicated. Just like with alcohol, the effects depend on the person. Some get a sense of euphoria, others feel invincible.
job
and
on
rash
this.
decisions.
Nailing
The diver
it.
might become
Really
anxious and
good.
weepy.
Dude,
Nitrogen narcosis can
Simon.
happen at almost any depth.
Awesome.
But once symptoms appear, it's imperative that the diver return to the surface. Continuing the dive can
Well, okay, that he missed. But other than that, Simon, dude, huge shout out. I don't know if he's going to watch this video, but if you do, shout out. Number one, he got Trimix right.
I know.
Everyone out there calls it Trimix, which always makes me crazy. He nailed it with Trimix. Number two, he explained nitrogen narcosis accurately.
great.
That never happens.
He's really good. He's very good. He's very technical. That's why I
only-
said he's very, very good.
The only thing he messed up in is to say that if you get narked, you have to go to the surface. You don't. You just have to ascend up until you're not narcotic anymore. So one thing with nitrogen narcosis, and you learned this on your very first scuba class, that's why I don't think he's a diver, is if you feel narc, you just go up a little bit and you don't feel narc anymore.
Yeah, there's no lagging effect. It goes away.
Correct. It goes away.
Like all of a sudden, you're clear again.
Most people feel narked past 30 meters or 100 feet. So let's say at 110 feet, 30 something meters, you start feeling narc, just go up to like 20 something meters or like 90 feet and you won't feel narc anymore. So you don't have to go to the surface. You don't have to end your dive.
And that's what Trimix is for. That's why they add helium.
Yes.
That gas doesn't give you the narcotic feeling of nitrogen. And even oxygen is narcotic, they know.
Simon, great job, dude. Awesome.
Can cause clumsiness, confusion, even hallucinations. Sheck Exley seemed to be curiously immune to both nitrogen narcosis and decompression sickness, but his body was changing as he aged, and he wasn't able to outrun the consequences of diving deep forever. In August 1993, he attempted to reach the bottom of Bushman's Hole in South Africa, a high-elevation cenote with a depth of 863 feet or 263 meters. During the descent, Exley experienced his first case of high-pressure nervous syndrome, or HPNS, also called helium tremors. This happens when a diver descends to depths while breathing trimix, which contains helium. The helium can prevent decompression sickness, but for reasons that are not fully understood, it can also cause divers in high-pressure conditions to experience a...
No. The helium cannot prevent decompression sickness. The helium can prevent being narked. He's doing great, but I just want to clarify.
Overall, he's doing.
He said that a little fast.
Yeah.
Right. You could still get helium bubbles.
You're going to have to
helium
decompress,
bubbles more actually.
Yeah.
Two different things. One is bubbling too fast. One is I'm narked and I'm out of my mind. And helium prevents the narked, I'm out of my mind.
Correct.
Not decompression sickness.
Yep.
Range of problematic symptoms. At 700 feet, Exley began to tremble and his vision blurred before shattering into countless tiny circles. His skin itched, then it felt like it was on fire. Despite these challenges, Exley kept going. He touched the bottom of Bushman's Hole and began his ascent to the surface, still trembling uncontrollably. As he completed his planned decompression stops, the symptoms gradually faded away as the pressure on his body reduced. It was the first time that his beloved sport had turned on him, and many believed that it wasn't going to be the last. Sheck Exley realized that he was getting older, and it might be time to put record-attempting deep dives behind him. But he wanted to go out with a bang.
He died young.
So, when he heard that the Zacaton cenote had a depth of 1,080 feet, he got the idea to be the first person to cross the 1,000-foot threshold. It had a nice ring to it, and it would be the perfect note on which to end his career. The record-attempting dive at Zacaton was planned for April the 6th, 1994, when Exley's school would be on spring break. To make sure that he wouldn't be affected by HPNS, he completed several test dives to see if the helium tremors returned. He and his dive partner, Jim Bowden, also worked with scientists to figure out what combinations of oxygen, nitrogen, and helium would be appropriate for over 1,000 feet below the surface. But since no one had ever gone that far, all calculations were just educated guesses. On the day of the dive, a group of Mexican locals, a few sports magazines, and a small TV crew arrived at the Zacaton cenote to watch the world-famous cave diver break a world record. Also in the audience was Exley's wife, Mary Ellen Eckhoff, an accomplished diver in her own right, and Bowden's wife, Karen. There were also some friends who came out to be supportive. The crowd watched as the two men swam across the surface to the two weighted guide ropes that had been...
By the way, let me go back for a second here because I want to point out, and I'm
The
not...
crowd
What's the cenote, right? In order to make it to the cenote, which is where the record was going to be tried, you have to cave dive this whole portion. So they actually enter in the river up here, and then they would cave dive and pop out in the cenote. So before you start the record, you're cave diving. I guess you could like rappel down or something from the side, but
looks pretty difficult to get in there otherwise.
But these guys just did a cave dive into the cenote. How badass is that?
Amazing.
Watched as the two men swam across the surface to the two weighted guide ropes that had been hung for their descent. 2 days earlier, air tanks for their lengthy decompression stops had been clipped to the line for their return. If all went well, the dive partners would descend to the bottom in a matter of minutes, tap the bottom of Zacaton, and spend hours safely returning to the surface. Sheck Exley and Jim Bowden reached their guide ropes and paused, bobbing on the surface of the water. For several long moments, they meditated, slowing their breathing to a few breaths per minute. Then, at 9:45 in the morning, Jim Bowden disappeared beneath the surface, following his guide rope. A moment later, Exley did the same. Both men had multiple air tanks with different gas mixtures weighing over 200 pounds. As they descended past 300 feet, they switched to the trimix. At 700 feet, Bowden began to shake uncontrollably, an unmistakable sign of HPNS. He considered returning to the surface, but saw that Exley's dive light was still moving down the guideline. He didn't want to leave his friend behind. At 874 feet below the surface, Bowden checked his gas gauge. To his surprise, he only had 1,000 psi of trimix remaining. He'd expected to have almost double that amount. With 2/3 of his gas already gone, Bowden had no choice but to turn around and head back to the surface. At only 11 minutes into the dive, he inflated his buoyancy device and began rising toward the first decompression stop. He reached the waiting air tanks just in time. Unfortunately, as he switched tanks, his regulator malfunctioned. This crucial piece of equipment turns the pressurized air of the tank into a steady and breathable flow. So when Bowden connected to the new tank, the force of the air shot his mouthpiece flailing into the water. Bowden realized that he had no choice but to use the faulty air tank, and that meant he was going to have to manually open and close the valve of the tank each time he took a breath. It was slow going, but finally he made it to the next decompression stop. At 300 feet below the surface, Bowden ditched the tank with the broken regulator and swapped it out with a new one. Now that he didn't have to focus all of his attention on breathing, he looked toward Exley's guideline. It was completely still. He looked down toward the bottom of the pit, searching for his friend's flashlight. Below him, It was only darkness. Meanwhile, on the surface, the support team was beginning to grow concerned. They knew that the bubbles from the scuba gear would be partially obscured by an underwater ledge, but they were supposed to reappear after 18 minutes. Bowden's bubbles were right on schedule, but Exley's line was still silent. The support team included Dr. Anne Kristovich, a diver who'd earned the women's world depth record for her dive at Zakoton the previous year. Sensing there was something wrong, she dove into the sea note to investigate. She found Bowden at his next decompression stop, but there was no sign of Sheck Exley. With no idea of what went wrong, there was no way for them to help. At the surface, Exley's wife noticed Dr. Kristovich was missing and wondered if everything was all right. She found Bowden's wife, Karen, who explained that her husband's bubbles had yet to reappear. She had barely finished speaking when Mary Ellen dove into the water, ready to find her husband herself. At 170 feet below the surface, Mary Ellen found Dr. Kristovich and Jim Bowden at a decompression stop. Using a whiteboard, she communicated that she was going down to 250 feet, the depth of the underwater ledge. Hopefully, she would see her husband's bubbles and know he was still alive. Mary Ellen reached the ledge and peered down into the darkness, hoping to see a distant light. But there was nothing.
Really bad
There were no
feeling.
bubbles either. She'd been diving long enough to know what that meant. After watching Mary Ellen disappear, Karen grabbed her own scuba equipment and entered the Zakoton sinkhole. At 100 feet below the surface, she spotted Mary Ellen swimming towards her. At the same time, Karen could see that she was crying. Mary Ellen had to swim toward the surface, but Karen grabbed her wrist and checked her depth meter. She needed to stay down for 30 minutes or she'd be at risk of decompression sickness. Karen wrapped Mary Ellen in a hug and held her there the whole time. They both cried. Ironically, the person who could best understand their pain was Sheck Exley, the man who'd watched his brother disappear into the depths of a Florida swimming hole. This was exactly the kind of grief that he'd spent his life trying to prevent, and now he was the one lost to the watery depths. He would have known exactly how painful his own death would feel to those that he loved. The 30 minutes passed, and the two women returned to the surface. The crowd watched as they pulled off their tear-filled masks, and all hope of seeing Sheck Exley break the world record disappeared as Mary Ellen began to scream. 2 days later, the still shocked support crew returned to the Zakoton cenote. They needed to reel in Exley's guideline. The line was still hung with unused decompression air tanks, so the team attached it to a mechanical pulley. Slowly, the 1,000 feet of rope that served as Exley's lifeline returned to the surface. But there were more than just air tanks attached to the line. Toward the end was Exley's body. He'd wrapped the rope over both of his arms and over the valves of his air tanks. Considering he'd written the book on avoiding getting tangled, this didn't appear to be accidental. His air tanks were empty, and his depth meter read 879 feet. But there were no further clues as to what had happened in the depths of the Zakoton cenote. Some believe that he had experienced another bout of HPNS and wrapped himself in the rope to steady himself until the episode passed. Others think the gas mixtures might have been off. After all, Bowden had used more than expected during the descent. Exley, understanding that trying to retrieve a body from an underground cave can be as dangerous as removing one from Mount Everest, may have tangled himself intentionally to ensure that no one died looking for his remains. In a eulogy for his friend and dive
That's
partner,
amazing.
Jim Bowden wrote that Sheck Exley had told him in the days before their dive that the greatest joy a teacher can have is to watch their students surpass them. He knows that his friend would be pleased to hear about all the depth records that have happened since his death and all the underwater caves that have been further explored. Sheck Exley had not been afraid of the dark, or the caverns, or the dangers that lurk beneath the surface. As an advocate for cave diving safety, he'd ended Zakoton, knowing the risks better than anyone. But like so many divers before him, he couldn't resist the idea that he and others might just make it a bit further. Thank you for watching.
Anyway, yeah, Sheck is a legend, obviously, for cave diving, for diving overall, and he was special, not just as a explorer and as a adventure-driven person, but he was special as a diver in terms of what things can do. Like, this dive that they did at Zakoton is, there's a lot of information that we know about it. One of them was the dive plans. Like Sheck's dive plans for the dive, you know, how they were like, well, he was like guessing or whatever to some depths, like what gas to bring or whatever. Those plans were made public. You can go and find them and read them. And if you're not a diver, they don't make any sense because you don't know. But if you're a tech diver especially, they are insane. Like, they're breathing air down to like 400 feet or something. I mean, it's like the maximum operating depth of air is 218 feet. That's where we deem it that anything deeper than this is dangerous. These guys are breathing that to almost double the maximum operating depth. That's just their transition gas. They're just breathing air twice as deep as you should. And the fact that they weren't dying tells me that Sheck was just born to be a diver. Like, he's better physiologically than every diver that I know. I mean, the guy was a stud. He was a beast. And I always regret when I hear people saying that cave diving is so insane and so dangerous that even the father of cave diving, Sheck Exley, died cave diving. No, he died trying to set the deepest cave record ever and diving gases deeper than anyone. Like, the thing that he was doing, to say that he died cave diving, and that's an example of how dangerous cave diving is to say that whoever was trying to set the world record for land speed, those cars that you strap in and they do like 1,000 miles an hour, and then you hit a bump and they just crash and you disintegrate, is to say that that's an example that, wow, even this professional race car driver died driving a car, so driving is dangerous. No, that guy was doing the most extreme driving you can do, and he died doing that. That doesn't mean that regular driving is as dangerous as that. So Sheck was doing something that was like never done before. He's literally setting a world record, and he died doing that. That doesn't mean that makes all cave diving as dangerous as that.
I don't really have anything to add to it.
I just want to say
we still use all of his rules today.
Absolutely.
That's what's amazing. If you go and look at all the cave courses, they all came from him.
And you can spend days reading about it. The books that he wrote, like his exploration at Peacock Springs, he almost died multiple times exploring there, getting lost and stuff like that. It's just unbelievable. And this specific incident where he died was covered before on Dive Talk in a lot more detail, and I'm gonna leave it right here so you can go check it out. It's a classic of Sheck.
Right,
Total legend.
Yes, he is.